Okay. We're continuing Pei Aleph Halacha Aleph. The Mechaber had spoken about Mei Raglayim, the din of Mei Raglayim. So we're going to speak a bunch of things related to Kashrus of Mei Raglayim, and that sounds strange. Two things I'm just going to mention in passing that we're not going to talk about is that the Shach speaks about that even if certain Mei Raglayim might be mutter, it might be this about the Shatzu to eat the Mei Raglayim, and he talks about when it is or is not. We spoke about that at the beginning of Pei Daled, about the Shatzu and things that are really mutter, but they, to your average consumer, seem disgusting. That's one thing. And the second is that the Mechaber says that Mei Raglayim of people and of animals are all the same. The implication is that they all have the same din. The Maisa is the place can speak about. The Gemara Bukhari says that the Mei Raglayim of a Chamor has a worse status than the other one. There's a big shot on the Chayyim why the Mechaber doesn't say that. The Mechaber just says talks Mei Raglayim of Adam and Mei Raglayim of Behemoths, but doesn't make any differentiation that a Chamor might be different. It's not sort of get to us that I can see, so that's what I'm not talking about. Okay, you never know. So we're going to talk about two different things today, and the first is like this. The Mechaber has 2 days where the Mei Raglayim of an animal is mutter and asur, which is a machlokes in the Gemara. It's a machlokes, it's 2 days in the Gemara. So, and the Mechaber implies that you should be machmir about this. And the question is, what's the machlokes over here? Okay, what are they arguing about? What's this machlokes whether Mei Raglayim is mutter asur? We're coming to we're going to have. I'm talking about it because I think we have practical applications, sort of. So the Gemara says, the Gemara explains why the Mekilim Mekel. Why should Mei Raglayim be mutter? Why isn't it a regular yotze from an animal? I mean, that's our statement. It's about yotze, that a yotze from a tummy is tummy. So why shouldn't Mei Raglayim of an animal be asur? So the Gemara says, mile o mile nofuk. That when an animal urinates, all it is, the water went in, the water came out. So it's all the same thing. So it's not a yotze from the animal. It's not like the animal gave off something, like the animal made milk. The animal didn't drink the milk. The animal just gave off the milk. But this, the Gemara, it gave off. And the Gemara says, it's exactly like the daya that holds that honey is mutter because it goes through the animal. There's 2 days. We'll get that at the end of the simon. 2 days, that's why honey is mutter. 1 day is that honey is mutter because the animal doesn't produce it. It just passes through the animal's body, but it doesn't really, the animal's not really, it's not a yotze from the animal itself. And therefore, the Gemara says this day that's mekel is like that day that by honey is mutter, to the point the Gemara has to understand to the other days. Okay, so we're understanding, now by the case of honey, everybody knows that bees don't eat honey. Okay, bees for sure don't eat the honey. So when we say that by honey, it goes in, the same thing that goes in is what comes out. It obviously doesn't mean exactly what went in is what went out. But that's obviously not what the Gemara had in mind, because bees don't eat honey. Bees eat nectar. They eat plants, and when they eat the nectar off the plant, out comes honey. So the Gemara means is that it's reasonably the same thing. What they took in this sweet item from the plant, out came out a sweet thing called honey. Now the bee for sure did something. We'll talk about that later what he did. But the Gemara doesn't mean exactly mile nofik. It doesn't mean exactly what came in is what went out. But what it means is that it's reasonably unprocessed by the animal, and reasonably what went in is what came out. The Gemara doesn't mean it exactly. So that's what the Mekilim hold. What are the Machmir hold? What's the day in the Gemara and the Shulchan, which seems to be the halacha, that the Mei Raglayim is asur? Why is it not true that mile nofik? What's the difference? What's the machlokes about? So to answer. To explain it, I'm going to tell you over something, a tshuva from Rabbi Eckstein, Rabbi Anshel Eckstein, a tshuva that he wrote very recently. It's a recent tshuva.
Stark.
What?
You don't know anything beforehand? Is it early source or just...
I'm sure people know very before. Just let me talk. He said that the Shach, he brings that the Shach in Siman Pegimel, it really is going to kasha. And the kasha that Tosfos asks, and that the Shach talks about, is, our din said that Mei Raglayim is asur because we assume that the Mei Raglayim, even though the animals drank water and out came water on the other side, we assume that as it passed through the body, it got affected and somehow it got changed by what happened in the body. In other words, even the Machmirim are agreeing that the mile oil mile it went into the body and came out the same way. So why? So, and Arjun is saying that that's still usher. When Maisa got affected by the body, it's usher. So how come there's a din by dugim if you have a treif fish and you cut it open and inside the treif fish you find the kosher fish? A fish is in its stomach. You ate a kosher fish and you find it in there. The din is you're allowed to eat that fish. That kosher fish that you find inside is kosher. Why don't we say that the fish, when it got eaten by the treif fish, the fish that got eaten was also affected? If we say that the mile nothing by passing through the system, it somehow got affected enough to be changed, that it's not considered just plain water. It's considered to be now affected by the fish, but affected by the animal, and now it's treif. So to the fish that got taken in, it looks like a fish, just like this looks like water, but it was affected by the fish that was there before you.
What? There's a difference between fish and water.
What's the
difference? Urine doesn't look like water.
Urine does not look like water?
Yeah, I mean, it's different qualities, different colors.
Okay.
It's like a fish. It's still a fish.
Okay, maybe. Okay, yeah. What do you say?
Number one, we made it's only Bishat Yitzir. That's number one. Number two, it's more than the fish. But you know this is the fish. It got changed. Maybe it changed the whole thing, but it can't be else.
Okay, so both of you are saying along the lines of what Taisus answers. It Taisus Kashrus, and the Shach brings it. The answer is that he says by Mei Raglayim, the words of Taisus are that lachluchas haguf mis'arabem. In other words, even the Machmirim hold that it's mile nothing. Water went in and water came out. But to a certain extent, there are other juices, other things had been mixed into it, to the point that we no longer can be sure whether it's mainly water, which would be mutter, the water went in and went out, or if it's mainly the other things. There are other things that have been mixed into it. Like you said, it's not exactly water, right? It doesn't come out looking the same as it went in. That's not 100% our problem. Honey also doesn't come out looking the way it did. But by honey, we're sort of convinced that somehow it came in one way, it looked out different, but not so different. The ikar is still what came in. But over here, we're mesupik. That's our Rabbi excellent. We're mesupik that maybe what went out, the ikar is not water. The ikar is those other things, and therefore it's mutter. But by the fish, everyone could tell that the ikar is still the original fish. It may have been affected. It's been partially digested. It's been a certain amount affected. But by the fish, it's pretty obvious that the ikar, that the kosher fish that was swallowed is still the fish that was there. Nothing changed about that. And by the water, it's not so clear. To the point that some machlokes, one Maliyama says, mile nothing. The water that came in is the ikar anyhow. And the other one says, you never could be sure how much of this is the other stuff, and maybe the ikar is not the water, the ikar is the other thing, and therefore the water should be changed. Okay? So that's how the Shach with a little hesber says like that. So, Rabbi Ekstein says, halacha of lo l'maisa, that's what he says. He says, I'm not saying this l'maisa, it's halacha lo l'maisa. In Cain, if we take these unusual coffees that he wants to talk about, he wants to say they should be mutter. What coffees are talking about? There's two versions of it. Okay, the one he was talking about was not this one. The one we have in front of us is, it's called Kopi Luwak coffee. Okay, they feed the coffee beans to a cat, to a civet cat, and when the cat excretes it, the coffee beans or some of them are still whole. I don't know how many of them, but are still whole. And some. Okay, he Rabbi Ekstein gives a whole hesber as to who came up with this Mishnah, guys. Who was the genius who thought of taking out the coffee beans out of there? Okay, that he has his whole hesber for why they did that. That's not so important. Which Mishnah was the first guy to do it?
When was this? When did this begin?
This began this one a while ago. This has been going on for a while.
Of years?
I'm not sure. Something like that. This goes on in Thailand. Okay, but the one he was talking about is called, the nice name of it is called black ivory coffee. Okay, black ivory coffee is they feed coffee beans to elephants. Okay, and when the elephants excrete it, then they also they think that those coffee beans are better. The theory is that the animal's stomach digests some of the proteins in the coffee, making it not so bitter. It takes away some of the bitterness in the coffee because the proteins are being digested. I have no idea. Okay, you have to wonder how many scientists have studied this stuff. It doesn't seem like a very scientific kind of thing. But anyhow, whatever it is, the people make coffee out of either the coffee beans that have passed through an elephant or coffee beans that have passed through a civet cat. And if you want, it's about $50 a cup for the other stuff. This is like half price only. This stuff from the civet is only about half price.
For the next Starbucks.
But if you want the one for the elephant, it's about $50 a cup, and you have to go to I forgot where, someplace in the Far East where they make it. You get it in America also? Oh, Baruch Hashem.
Oh, sure.
Baruch Hashem, we could get it going for the elephant. They call it black ivory coffee. And yeah, so this stuff but it's cheaper. In case if you're really
In the Philippines, it's very cheap.
which one? This one?
Yeah.
Oh really? Okay, that's Kadai, right? It's and so he wants to say is so if we had to think about what is the coffee bean comparable to, so the coffee bean is like the fish. In other words, when the coffee bean passes through, it's been affected. Well, that doesn't bother us. That's been affected a little bit. But the ikar is still the thing itself. Anybody looking at it can tell this is still a coffee bean that went through. You can see it's still a coffee bean because it looks like a coffee bean. It's like the case of the fish. So therefore, in that case, that's the case when it's mutter. It's only by the Mei Raglayim that the Mei Raglayim is mixed together with the liquids in the body, then you have to wonder. Now, it's not like what David said before. He said maybe it's only mutter halfway. Okay, but once it passes all the way through, then we're more chayshish. That could be an answer. That's not Tosh's answer. Shach doesn't say that. The Shach says it's over here, we're worried that lachluchos are going to mix into it, and by the fish, we're not worried about it. And he's
They know the Yaitza, right?
Yes.
Here it's something else. Maybe it's Toma in it. There's nothing to do with Yaitza.
Right. So what's you say? Why does it happen when it leaves the body more than when it's in the body?
When there was Mechadish has Yaitza, so they did Yaitza. I mean, right?
No, but yaitza doesn't have to come out. No, because if you cook up a fish and pieces float off, that's also din of yaitza. Tear and things like that. Those are also within the actually. Yeah, that's the Gemara says. Those are within the din of yaitza. Doesn't have to leave the body to do it. The what? Right. Correct.
Right? You don't need that for a piece of fish that was there before. We stick on the velo and it separates itself in the pot and starts floating away.
Right. So Taisha says that the Gemara Drasha is for tzir. There's some kind of juices that come out while you're pickling it or you're doing things like that. Okay. So and he says a few times, he says halacha lo l'maisa. He doesn't really want people going around saying that he said you should eat this stuff. But anyhow, okay. So that was one child. Okay. What did you say? Maybe I said we're not talking about the shot. Because the reason why to be matter is because, but the reason why the fish is mutter is because it's obvious to everybody that even though it's been a little bit affected, the ikar remains the fish. And by the Mei Raglayim, you're mesupik that maybe the ikar is the other things and not the water. Okay, but everyone agrees that my oil, nothing, but you have to be mesupik that maybe the other things that are mixed in have become there. Okay. The second thing is there's a medicine called there's a drug called Premarin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Premarin. Okay, and Premarin, I'm not sure. It may be called Premarin. I'm not sure. Okay, and it's a contraction from the words pregnant mare urine. Okay, a mare is a female horse. Okay, it's a pregnant mare urine. Okay, and they smush that together to sound this very beautiful sounding Premarin. Okay, and it has hormones in it that somehow are good for certain conditions, okay? For ladies who are postmenopausal, it's good for them. So the hormones are good for them. I don't know who thought of this idea, okay? But anyhow, so that is such a thing. And the question is whether you can use it or you can't use it, okay? This one you can get in America. So it's easier in America. This is made here. Okay, so the Shulchan said that Mei Raglayim of an animal are asur. We assume that it's asur. So if you knew nothing, you would say, the first look at it, you'd say that it would be asur. What makes it more complicated is, it's available as a pill. That's how it comes in a pill form. And as a rule, we tell people that anything that's in a pill form is mutter. That's what we tell people. So now you say, so of course it's mutter. Now, before we go on, I have to tell you, there is this product called Premarin comes in a cream that has a completely different function. Okay? It's not like you could use the cream instead of the pill. Okay, so the pill is what we're talking about. It doesn't have a substitute. Okay? So the question is like this. There's a subtle machlokes about why pills are always mutter, a very subtle machlokes, and this case, I'm mentioning it to you, sorry, that has to do with Mei Raglayim. This case is a subtle nafkamina between these two shittas. And that's like this. The thing is, why are pills mutter? Why do you tell people they can take any pill they want to? Because it's not royal achila. Okay, if you try biting into a pill, you'll see that it's not royal achila. See now, but there's a din that when things become not royal achila, you're allowed, the issue of them falls off. But midrabanan, there's something called achshevei, and achshevei says that midrabanan, if I eat something that's not roy lachila, then I'm showing that I consider it roy lachila, sort of. In some sense, I consider it roy lachila. Or else, why am I eating it? So therefore, midrabanan, we say, oh, it is roy lachila. Even though the whole world is not roy lachila, and even I don't think it's roy lachila, but in a certain sense, by biting into this thing, I'm showing that I consider it roy lachila. So midrabanan, there's an isser to eat things that are not roy lachila. Things that are not roy lachila, for example, let's say, chametz, the Gemara says chametz, which is not roy lachila. This is the makar for the din. Chametz, it's not roy lachila. The Gemara says you can have hanor from it on Pesach. Okay, so most people would think is you can have hanor from it on Pesach because of course you're not going to eat it. Okay, but that's not what the Rosh says. The Rosh says no. The Gemara says you can have hanor from it because eating it itself is actually osur. Because if you eat it, then that's achshevei. That's showing that you consider roy lachila. Okay, that's most. We would have looked at it and said, no, the Gemara says you can have hanor from it because obviously, well, you're not going to eat it. Which the sugar would eat it. But the Rosh says that the Gemara is being meduyik that you can't eat it because of the osur garba. Okay, so that we only say achshevei. We only say achshevei on regular things, and we don't say achshevei when it comes to pills. If we would say achshevei, then the pill would be usher. It's not roy lachila, but I swallow it. Swallow it is like chewing, just like eating it. So if I eat it, then we should say achshevei, but we don't. Okay, we don't say it. So what's the reason why we don't say achshevei? Why don't we say that by the fact that I eat it shows that I consider it roy lachila? Okay, so there's two ways to explain why. And our case is a nafkamina between these two hesberim. And that is like this. Rav Moshe and Rav Chaim Ozer and others say like this. They say, and many other achronim say that when a person takes medicine, if a person is sick and they have to do something to make themselves better, people do all kinds of strange things in order to make themselves better, including eating things that taste awful. I mean, anytime you try to give a kid medicine, they'll tell you how awful it tastes. And sometimes you have to do something, even if it tastes bad or hurts or whatever it is, you do things that are not typical in order to get yourself better. So therefore, the fact that I'm eating something that's medicinal is not a raya that I consider to be edible. No, when you do things that are for medicinal purposes, you do even things that are not roy lachila. So usually, if I would take a piece of burnt chametz and I would eat the piece of burnt chametz, we'd say, "Oh, you must consider this to be edible. You obviously have different tastes than other people. You consider it edible." But that's only because it would be, so to speak, a regular food. But if you did it for medicinal purposes, then the fact that I'm eating it doesn't show that I consider it edible. It shows that I'm trying to make myself healthy. And that's why I'm eating this thing. So there's no achshevei when I'm doing it for to try to heal myself. That's what Moshe and many others say like that. Okay? The Chazon Ish says it, but the Chazon Ish says something a drop different. He says, when I take a medicine, then you're saying that by the fact that when I eat something, see, by the fact that I'm eating it is a raya that I consider this thing to be edible. But you have to look at it. So you're sort of like creeping into my mind and saying, oh, if you're eating it, you must consider it edible. See, he says, look at what I'm eating. If I'm eating this thing to make myself healthy, then the part that I consider edible is the medicinal part. The parts that come around, the trappings that come with it, all the else that comes with it, I'm not trying to eat that. I'm stuck with that. The only way to buy it is when it comes with all those other stuff with it. So, for example, if I have a pill and the thing that holds it together, that makes the pill hold as a pill, is made out of chametz, so you would say, I'm not trying to eat the chametz. The chametz is not what I want. I want the Tylenol that's in the middle of it. But I have no other choice but to eat it with this pill. That's how it comes. So I'm stuck with it. So you could say, actually, you could see that I consider the active ingredient to be a food. That you could say that, but you can't. But on the inactive ingredients, you wouldn't say that because the guy's not trying to eat inactive ingredients. He's trying to make himself. You're saying I'm showing that I consider it edible. I'm not showing that. I'm showing that I consider the active ingredient edible, not that I consider the inactive ingredients edible. And therefore, he says that you could take medicine made out of pills. But of course, we have an afkamina. Our din over here is an afkamina because here it's a rare situation. But here we have that the medicine itself is the item, the active ingredient is the part that would be treif. Usually, the active ingredient is nothing. Don't worry about the active ingredient. Only the inactive ingredient. So both would hold that it would be mutter. But here, with the Premarin itself, the active ingredient is come from Mei Raglayim of a mere, from an animal. So there, according to the Chazon Ish, you should say actually. He says, look, the fact that I'm eating it shows that I consider Premarin in this form to be edible because I have to get better. So for me, this is considered edible. And according to Moshe, has nothing to do. The fact that I'm doing it for medicine purposes, medicines, by their nature, doesn't show it's edible. You do all kinds of strange things to eat medicine, so there's no right, I think. So it would seem to come out that according to the Chazon Ish, you would not be allowed to take his pill. I'll just, before I finish, just mention, it's not, many people hold like a merchant. It's not just a merchant, there's many people hold like that, so it's not like you should feel bad being samach on that. But also is that the din of Achsheveh is only a din d'Rabbanan. So when the Chazon Ish said that you don't say Achsheveh on pills for the way his reason explained it, let's say you're not allowed to do it. Let's say there is Achsheveh. Achsheveh is only Asam d'Rabbanan. Many Yisur d'Rabbanan are mutter for Cholim under the right circumstances. So it could be that the Cholim could eat it anyhow. Okay, in other words, it could be that it is Achsheveh, and according to Chazon Ish, so to speak, it's Isser to eat it. It's Isser, but that doesn't mean you can't eat it. Then you can eat it anyhow because lots of Yisur d'Rabbanan become mutter for Cholim anyhow. Okay, but it's just that excuse me, I'm mentioning it because it comes out of nafkamina between these two different reasons, which are sort of lumped together usually. Here, where the active ingredient is itself the Isser, that's what comes out to be nafkamina.